Alright, this is your video for the urinalysis lab report. So, of course, you're going to have sections 1, okay, do the pen, see, 1, 2, and 3, okay, which are your introduction, your materials, procedures, and results, discussion, conclusion, okay. Now, here's the thing. You're actually going to do it, you looked at different variables here in this lab, right? You looked at urine volume, right? So we're looking at how salt, intake of salt is going to affect urine volume. We're also looking at the effect of density. So because we actually have um, two main independent variables right here, um, we can look at, two main dependent variables right here. Um, we're actually going to have to do a combination of data tables. We can't just do just one data table because we have two sets of data to go with. Now, you also did um, urine strips. Okay. Now, with the urine strips, I only want you to report any differences that has occurred. Okay. For example, if the pH of your urine changed from salt water versus no salt water, then you want to report that. Okay, and of course you'd have to have an applicable table to go along with it. Okay, because you should have some values to go with the color matching from your strip. Okay, now it's only the strips that had a difference. So for example, if your glucose level didn't change, then there's no reason to report it. Okay, if you wanted to mention it in in your results or in your discussion, you're welcome to. But I'm only wanting to concentrate on the dependent variables that actually caused a change, or at least the independent variable of adding salt to your water. Did it have an effect on? I only want you to report things that it had an effect on. Okay. So your background information, some important things that you should know for your background information. You should be mentioning, okay, the hormone ADH, okay, most aspects of it, where it's coming from, what's triggering it, why is it being secreted versus why is it not being secreted, okay, but uh, antidiuretic hormone is going to be a big thing for the background, okay. The purpose of the lab hopefully is pretty self-explanatory. I want to know what is the effect sodium chloride has on your you know your volume of your urine, the density of your urine, and what other variables or what other uh, characteristics you can look at of your urine, how that sodium chloride affected it. Okay. Um, you should have a hypothesis, right? You should, it's salt's going to affect it or it's not going to affect it, or salt density is going to be affected by salt or it won't be affected by salt, right? And of course, remember, you need these multiple hypotheses in if-then statements. Okay. Now you do have somewhat of a uh, a disadvantage because you've already done the lab, so your hypotheses will most likely not be rejected because you can analyze your results before you actually write your lab report. Um, but when you're doing or write your hypothesis after you've done your lab report or after you've done your data collection. So either way, whether what did you really think? Did you think salt was going to affect your volume? Did you think salt was going to affect the density? Be honest with yourself. So if it does get rejected, then you can offer an explanation as to why in your discussion. Or if it didn't, um, change your or if it didn't get rejected, your hypothesis did not get rejected, you can also add to that in your discussion as to um, why your uh, why your hypothesis was confirmed in this case. Okay. Um, Next, your materials procedure, right? Your materials that varies on what the what it is. This right here, you probably need a cup, and then you have your graduated cylinder, right? This you had a graduated cylinder, and which was um, not technically, well, it's part of your hydrometer, so I mean you can just mention a hydrometer, but I'd rather you have a smaller test tube, 10 paper clips, a strip of paper with calibrations on it. So mention that in your lab, because if somebody was to come and take your protocol and want to copy it, um, they're going to want to know what your apparatus looked like. What did your hydrometer look like? So you should give a brief description of that as well. Okay, brief description. Um, and of course, with the rest of number two, you need to identify your controls and your variables for this lab. Now, obviously, there's going to be um, multiple variables that go on right here. Okay, so but there should be multiple controls for each of the different types of dependent variable that you're looking at. Okay, um, with your results discussion and conclusion, like I said, I want your a couple tables. Um, let's see, I'd want your volume collection, your density difference, and then whatever, your urine strips, whatever information you can get out of that, that should also be arranged in a table. Now, if you want to combine tables, that's fine. I'm not worried about it, but I need to have all of your data in table form. Okay, your discussion, of course, you're explaining your findings. So you should be mentioning things like, the ADH. You should be mentioning things like the sodium chloride and how it affects the volume. Um, Not just saying, oh, it does. You should be telling me why. Okay, and then of course, lastly, our conclusion is, you know, whether or not your hypothesis was rejected or if it was not rejected. Right? Since you had multiple hypotheses, you should have multiple conclusions. All right. If you guys have any questions, by all means, ask me in class, and we'll get it situated.